Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Black in the Saddle. My name is Abriana, and in this episode, we are going to talk about grief. And I don't know if you can hear from my voice or if you're watching on YouTube, I am going to make this not necessarily a very heavy episode, okay? I want to be able to talk about grief in a way that is just kind of objective. We're not going to get too emotional. So if you looked at the title of this episode and you were like, ugh, I ain't got time for this today, just know that it is not going to be super heavy. I'm going to kind of talk about some of the situations that caused grief for me, and then the things that I'm doing to address that grief. So this episode is called Good Grief. Yes, that dramatic. I felt called to talk about this topic because of two situations. The first one was me seeing a post on Facebook, and I'm sure you have all seen these cute little memes or, horse funnies where it's like, oh, my horse has a veterinarian and a chiropractor and an acupuncturist and a farrier, and I have an aspirin and a 4-leaf clover. And I saw that post, someone shared it, and I reposted it, and I was like, I rebuke this. I absolutely rebuke this. I rebuke the energy or the sentiment that us as horse owners, horse people, have to absolutely not take care of ourselves and take care of the horse only. Granted, the way that our healthcare system is going under this current administration, this is the time we need to be concerned about our health. And so I feel like those words really mean something. Like, I mean, you've heard me say before, words mean things. And I think that when we share stuff like that, even in jest, it starts to kind of put some artifacts on your subconscious to say, oh yeah, I'm just fine. I'll be fine. Or, my horse has this thing, but I'm not going to take care of myself. And I just don't believe that to be true. It might happen when you're not necessarily having that awareness to really take care of yourself, because we do love these animals so much. But we need to take care of ourselves for our horse, for our relationship with the horse. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. The second thing that made me think about this is because I got back on TikTok, woohoo. And I came across a post by Tamika. I know her Instagram handle is Tamika the Horsewoman, but I'm not sure if it's the same on TikTok. It should be, but I don't know. And she was talking about how she was having a really challenging training time with her horse, and she was not enjoying her experience in that moment, but she was still riding and she was still showing up and she was still pushing for this vision that she had of a successful relationship with her horse. And those two things just got me thinking, along with some other conversations I've had with people, but they just got me thinking about what happens when our hopes and dreams don't align with our truth and don't align with the reality that we're experiencing. I think those are the conditions for grief. So in this episode, we're going to talk about when grief shows up. I'll share a little bit about how it showed up for me and how I'm working myself through that. And I'll share with you my 90-day recommitment plan, which is on day 88. Okay. I'll tell you why I'm counting down in a second. And that'll be it. So let's get into it. So words mean things. So what does grief mean? Grief, according to Webster's, according to Merriam, grief is a deep sorrow. It can be connected with someone's death or the death of something. But I also saw another definition that said that grief is an experience coping with loss. So just know that, the emotions that are connected to that can vary, right? It doesn't always have to be sadness. It can be anger, frustration, irritability, things like that. And I think that that's something that I learned throughout this process was, oh, wait a minute. I don't necessarily get sad when I'm grieving. Many times I'm quite irritable. And it took someone else to point that out to me for me to learn that. So oftentimes when grief shows up in our relationship with our horses, or just in this equestrian journey, many times it's from an injury, right? An injury of either the human. I have known friends who have had major injuries and they have had to work their way back to the saddle to figure out how to ride differently, figure out what they need to do to care for themselves so that they can do this thing that they have continued to dream of, which is riding their horse. It also could be an injury of the horse or a loss of a horse, that something that you have invested a lot of time and energy in, whether it's money, training, simply time, experiencing a loss that way is definitely a condition for grief. Also, if there is a loss of opportunity, there are countless stories of friends of mine who have, sought one opportunity in the horse industry and it fell through, or they thought that receiving mentorship from a particular person was going to be an amazing experience and it turned out to be trash. The whole don't meet your heroes kind of situation. That the loss of that opportunity can definitely put someone in a stage of grief. I also think that grief, like those are kind of some big things that happen in people's lives, right? But I think that grief can show up for you in the small things that pile up over time, that are disappointments, inconveniences, challenges, just minute things that just keep piling up. And we don't necessarily clear ourselves from that if we're not aware that, like, dang, that was where, my hope and dream and my truth, they just weren't in alignment. And the disappointment that came from that, I didn't necessarily process that. I know that for me, I finally, I finally unfriended someone online, and, I appreciated this person for how much I learned from them. But if you don't really know my backstory, I was a pre-vet student and I worked in an animal hospital for about 6 years. 3 years as a vet tech and 3 years managing the pet resort. And in my 3rd year as a vet tech, I applied to vet school. And one of the veterinarians at my job was one of my recommendations. And despite seeing me every single day, despite reminders, that person did not turn in my letter of recommendation on time. And so my application, the one I spent over $500 submitting, was null and void. because she wasn't on time, despite having 3 other letters of recommendation. Yeah. And that situation, like, it did crush me in a way, but I'm like, this is my job. Like, I have to continue to show up at this job. So I stuffed it down. I stuffed it down and was like, you know what? I'm not even going to say anything. And because I felt like so much was hinged on like that thing, I just knew that if I said anything, it was going to go from 0 to 100. And as a Black woman in a majority white space, I was concerned about showing up as that angry Black girl. You know, I had already excelled in technical skills. It's like, okay, you know, she's just going to show up as ungrateful and, you know, the angry Black girl and, you know, yeah. So instead of saying anything to her, I moved departments and started managing. And not that I have any regrets of that situation, but not that I have any regrets around where I am now. You know, despite being very much in the animal health and wellness space, I think that my veterinary background is helpful for me. I don't think that I was meant to be a veterinarian. I am actually very content with what I'm doing now. So the regret is not in not going to vet school. The regret is in not necessarily handling that situation the best way that I could and advocating for myself and standing up for myself in that. But it did give me the opportunity to get into business and gave me the foundations for the professional work that I do now. But something like that, you still have to process. Something like that still causes the conditions for grieving a life that you thought you were going to have. And I didn't necessarily do that for a very long time. You know, I've shared this before, but I have an assignment from when I was in the 1st grade that says, I want to travel the world and help animals like a vet in a Jeep and travel the world around, all the way around, something like that. And it's got a picture of me in a Jeep. And that was like my first illustration that I have documented anyway. And ultimately, I decided to simply reinterpret that calling of my 7-year-old self to say, yeah, it says like. Like is a simile. That means I can still do this thing even if I'm not a veterinarian. And that's what I do now. I have conversations with people who interact with horses to help them, or horses are animals in general, but to help them understand the animal in a way that continues to serve both of them in their relationships. So it all worked out. But the grief in not processing that, and that being, you know, maybe one of those little things, that little building block that just keeps adding and adding up to something that hasn't been processed. I share that story because grief is not always like loud. You know, it's not always this huge traumatic event and now I'm grieving, right? It can be small. It can be whispers that pile up. Like I said before, I didn't notice grief in myself recently until I had a mentor point it out to me. And this is someone that I met through the pet resort. So, you know, these things come full circle, and I'm just so thankful to have that experience because this is exactly how it was supposed to turn out. But this mentor, she said, you know, hey, I think you're grieving. like, I reached out to her for some help on some, professional things. And I said, I think I told the same story one too many times. And she's like, girl, you are grieving and you need to heal from this. So what are you going to do to heal and refocus on what it is you need to do? And I was like, what? Grieving? I was a caregiver for my granddad for 2.5 years. And I felt like I grieved him that whole time because he had dementia. He wasn't the grandfather that I knew. Towards the end, anyway. And even when he passed, I was thankful that he was no longer suffering. So I was thinking of grief in only that context. Like, oh, grief is only like when somebody dies. And so when she shared that it seemed like I was grieving because of my frustration with some professional things, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Grief isn't just one thing. Grief can show up in many different ways and have many different causes. And it's not caused just by a loss. It's not caused just by death or injury or harm. It can be caused by inconveniences, challenges, any time where your truth does not match up with the dreams that you had. And so then she dropped the hammer. And she said, Abriana, when was the last time you rode your horse? I was like, what? Not this year. And she looked at me. She was like, what do you mean? What do you mean not this year? And I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. No, I haven't ridden my horse this year. The last time I rode him, I did a clinic in Zebulon at the Red Mule Farm with my friend Shannon, and the clinician was The clinician was Linda Hoover, and we did like an obstacle clinic, and I did a private lesson also. And we hadn't really ridden since then. And it's been for several reasons, things with Cowgirl Cameron picking up and me needing to do work with Encore to make sure that he was ready, and traveling and weather conditions. And I can come up with so many different reasons, but also I have not ever made it a priority. It just hasn't been a priority for me to ride. And my horses are at my parents' house, which is 1.5 hours from where I live. And even though I'm there a lot during the summertime, just because of my travel schedule, riding has never been something that I made sure I got in. And I have a trail around my house. Despite living in a residential area, it's not super busy, so we can ride safely. But it's just never been a thing. It just hadn't been a priority for me. And so I started to reflect on that, to say, why is that? Why have I not made that a priority? And I know that that's something that is so important to me. I think that for a long time in doing the work with horses on the ground, if you're not familiar with equine facilitated learning, it is when you are having interactions with the horse, many times unmounted, so you're on the ground, but with the objective of learning something about yourself. All right. I do that work like that's my job. That is my job. I do that work with kids, obviously, through Cowgirl Cameron, but I also do it with adults, and I do leadership development with these horses. And so because I've been entrenched in that work for the last 4 years, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't need to ride. Like, yes, we have this relationship. Yeah, like we're having on the ground, you can learn so many more things. And it's like, yeah, you absolutely can. But also, you also enjoy riding, and that's okay. So for a long time, I was like, yeah, you know, I just want to have a good relationship with my horse, so I don't have to ride. And not really acknowledging the fact that but I really do enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. And I like to think that my horse enjoys it too, but I think he enjoys it better when I'm ready and when he's ready. One of the things that I was also trying to avoid was taking my life stress into my relationship with my horse. So because I had some things going on in my professional career that is directly connected to horses, when working with my horse, I didn't want to take that with me. I didn't want to take the frustration with me. I just wanted to be able to sit with him, you know, groom him, make sure he's taken care of. I do his feet, all that. But I didn't want to take frustration with me into his pasture. And for a while, I couldn't really like divorce it. You know, I would just go out there, give him treats and give him loving and be like, all right, bro, you doing great. Keep up the good work. Because we all know how horses can do the darndest things, but he's fantastic. So I just give him that props and we move on. But at the end of the day, all of those are excuses, right? Those are excuses, and those are me taking it for granted, this life and the gift that I have of having my horses at the house, having them accessible to me at all times, having them safe, having people that care for them, that know my standard of care, having a place for them to go that I am not shelling out a ton of coin for every single month. That is me taking for granted that gift, especially not maximizing it in the ways that I know that I would really enjoy. And not only that, but from another conversation that I've had in the past, I feel like something that can show up for maybe myself and maybe for you too is this this bit of isolation, especially during the wintertime. Especially during the wintertime when it's not really fun to be out there. But not only isolation from just the horse, not just not going outside, but from the people that would encourage that, right? They would encourage those interactions with your horse because they're riding their horse too. Just kind of staying away from the things that energize me, that kind of isolation. I think that all of those are just excuses to not remind myself of one of the things that I really enjoy, and one of the things that restores me, and one of the things that brought me here to this podcast, Black in the Saddle. Like, girl, you black and you're not in the saddle. I know it's a euphemism, but still, you're not riding. So I am on a journey to change that. Not just for myself, not just for my horse, but for the sheer principle I want to be a better person. And I know that I'm a better person when I pour into myself. So I have come up with this 90-day recommitment plan. I turned 33 in 88 days. I told y'all it was 88 days. And so I am counting down to this 90-day recommitment for the betterment of myself and my relationship with my horse. So let's get into that. My 90-day recommitment plan, it ends on my 33rd birthday. I started it 2 days ago. Okay, I realized I started a day late, so it'll end the day after my 33rd birthday. But still, I have decided that I can't ask of my horse what I won't require of myself. And I'm curious if you have ever felt this way, the things that you're asking your horse to show up with or to show up for, you're not necessarily doing those things for yourself. I am to the point where I've never been one to compete heavily. I very quickly realized that it feels crazy to me to pay people to judge me. But I feel like even if you're not competing, you can still be working towards something. You can work towards a goal. The things that I'm asking of my horse are willingness to try. Obviously, we're going to have some increased physical activity, so preparing for that. Learning something new. That's it. Willingness to try, increased activity, and learning something new. And if I can't ask myself those things, then how the heck do I ask that of my horse? And you might not be in the mindset of thinking this deeply about it. But when you work with horses in EFL work and just, I mean, that's what my background is in, right? Paying very keen attention to the animal and this concept of One Health, which is the interaction between human, animal, and environmental health and wellness. Those are the things that I am always very conscious of. So if it seems a little woo to you, welcome. Welcome to the woo. Glad to have you here. But if I'm going to ask myself or my horse to be willing to try this with me, be willing to, he's been a pasture fluff for quite some time. He living with his grandparents, so he gets fed snacks, and then he's not asked to do anything really. So we gonna have to get back in shape, and I can ask him to get in shape if I'm not in shape myself. So now I have to work into this plan what that is going to require of me. And then for me also, it's not just physical. It is also mental, social, and emotional. These kind of facets of this 90-day recommitment, because I am a human and I live in the human world. He lives in the pasture. So there are some things that I am also doing to support me in those ways. So there is a very much holistic approach to this 90-day recommitment. And if you're interested in preparing your own 90-day recommitment plan, I will have something, a download that you can use to kind of guide your thinking and help you come up with that plan. You can find that in the show notes or in the caption or comments, or just go to the website. But in order for me, or in order for this to work, I'm going to have to create some sort of goal, right? The goal primarily is, to do this for 90 days. But I feel like many times when goal setting, you are looking for the outcome. You are setting a goal for, we are going to accomplish this thing. And I have learned about myself that those kind of goals don't motivate me. Because especially in the world that we live in, things change so quickly. That goal could be obsolete in 2 weeks because of how the world has changed. I had some life goals that, were buying property here and making sure that I could have an operation here. And as of recently, those goals have changed, especially after visiting Thailand and taking a 20-minute speedboat to an island that has horses in an arena. Wait a minute. We could do this anywhere. I'll get into that in another episode. Y'all let me know if you want to hear more about that, but we'll talk about that later. But I won't say no longer, but I'm being more selective about how I set goals, knowing that the goals don't necessarily have to be a particular outcome. I think there's a difference between outcome goals and process goals. And what I'm doing here is setting goals for the process, not necessarily the outcome. The outcome will happen either way. What I need to be focused on is sticking to the process. And so that's what I'm creating these goals around. That's what this 90-day recommitment plan is committing to this process. My goal is to do these things for 90 days or have these things happen within the next 90 days. In that, I have to come up with a way to acknowledge the progress that I am making. If you are going to make process goals, you have to be able to acknowledge the progress you are making so that continues to reinforce you completing that process. So for me, if I'll share, one of them is kind of like a 75 medium. I can't do 75 hard, okay? I'm not working out twice a day. I don't have time. I don't have time to be sweaty multiple times a day. But in that, I want to do 10,000 steps a day. And so my goal and part of that process is getting at least 7,000 to 8,000 of those steps done before 8 o'clock in the morning. So I have been walking with my dogs to get those steps done early so that the rest of the steps are just natural steps that are just in my life for the rest of the day to reach that 10K a day. And I have been documenting that or holding myself accountable to that by sharing things that I'm thinking about while I'm walking on TikTok every morning. And I think that this notion of other people holding you accountable for something is not the same as you holding yourself accountable. We have seen this with the politicians that are on the news right now. Many times people are like, yeah, we're going to hold so-and-so accountable. We're going to call them out and say, this is what you have and have not done. What we have also learned is many of them don't care. So how is it that we hold someone else accountable for something that they're not willing to hold themselves accountable for? Yeah, that don't make sense to me. So in a way, in developing this 90-day recommitment plan, you need to find ways that you can hold yourself accountable. If that is sharing your journey with someone, if that is journaling it, if that is creating a chart and having a sticker or marking it out every single day, however that works for you, however that shows up for you, that's perfectly fine. But it just needs to be part of the plan. Because if we are not tracking our progress or thinking about it every single day, you're going to miss a day. You're going to be like, oh, dang, I missed a day. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, darn. I'll start tomorrow. And that's not what this is, friends. That is not what this is. Okay, let me get back to my plan. So in the physical realm, I talked about the 75 medium. So the things that I'm going to do are these 10K steps a day. That is not saying that I'm working out for a particular amount of hours or minutes or whatever. I'm getting 10,000 steps a day. I am going to read for 30 minutes minimum. This is not hard for me. I'm reading about 3 books right now at once. So this is a very easy thing for me, but recently I hadn't been focusing on it much because I've been back on social media. And that brings me to my next point, reducing social media daily. I have this app called the Stay Free app. And it's like a app closer. Like when you run out of your time limit, it closes the app for you and it offers you a quote basically about wasting time and kind of shames you into doing something different. I need that. I need someone to guilt me into getting off the scroll. Okay. And then the last thing is no fried foods. It's going to be hard. It is going to be hard, y'all. And I already fully acknowledge my family reunion is coming up this weekend. I'm probably going to eat something fried. But I'm also going to balance it with a lot of water and not eating it every single day from Thursday to Sunday. Okay? So that's going to be a little blip in the 90 days. I'm not going to let that deter me from my plan. All right. When it comes to working with Maestro, my horse, in the next 90 days, I want to book 3 lessons. 3 lessons. I have the trainer, Linda Hoover, that I've worked with in the past. And I was just telling her, I just want to be better for my horse. So I want to build up my self-awareness to how my body is moving when I'm on him and the different cues that I'm giving him and what, he hasn't never been to a different trainer. He's not finished in any way. So how can I ask for things differently or ask for them in a way that I have never asked for before that makes sense for him? So I may book all 3 lessons with her. I may find someone else to book a lesson with. Not 100% sure, but in the next 90 days, we're going to book 3 lessons. And then at there's a lake that's not too far from me called Jordan Lake. That's actually where our family camp out usually is held, but not this year. Jordan Lake has I think it's Jordan Lake Trail Access Association or something like that. But the North Carolina Horse Council has been working diligently to increase horse trails across the state. And at Jordan Lake, they have been cutting additional horse trails. And you could only ride on these trails during not hunting season, which is like right now. So I want to go ride there because they just opened up a new loop. And I think there's like a 5-mile loop, a 4-mile loop, and a 3-mile loop. So I want to go ride at the lake that is 20 minutes away. So in order to do that, I need to clean my trailer and clean out my tack room. I have been, just from the winter time, I threw the blankets in there. I threw the water trough heater in there. I need to clean it out. So the next time I'm home in Chapel Hill with my parents and the horses, I'm going to pull the trailer out. I'm going to power wash it, and I'm going to clean the tack room out and restock it like we about to go somewhere. I'm going to check my tack and make sure I have everything that I need to ride. Like on my saddle, I feel like something broke. I can't remember what it was, but I'll replace that so that I can be prepared and ready to go whenever. And lastly, I want to haul to Georgia. My friend Avery has a farm in Georgia that he just has been building out amazingly. And I want to take my horse down there. And that feels like a final boss situation. That feels like, what do you mean haul your horse 6 hours? I have never done that. I also know that that might be contingent upon the weather that we have been getting because of climate change. It's also hot, and my trailer is not like air conditioned by any means. I already thought like, hey, we need to ride, or we would need to go at nighttime or like really early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, just so it's not super hot. But also it's Georgia. It's hot, period. So that is the only thing that like might have to come after the 90 days. It might have to come after the summertime and the fall, even because it might still be pretty warm in the fall. So the next thing that I am focusing on in my plan is to find a new therapist. I've always been a proponent of therapy and therapy resources that allow you to get low to no cost therapy. So I've received funding from the Loveland Foundation that gives me 12 vouchers for therapy over the next year. And so I just need to find a therapist that is going to take those vouchers. And I'm also looking to find a therapist that does not offer just talk therapy. I'm looking for a more somatic therapy experience because I will intellectualize the hell out of my problems. And I will talk through it and be like, wow, I feel no different afterwards. I don't necessarily know that I heal from that. So I'm just looking for some different ways to approach therapy. So if you are looking for a therapist and you need some assistance with that, check out the Loveland Foundation. Love, L-O-V-E, Land, L-A-N-D, Foundation, and see what resources that they have. So that's what I'll be doing to support my mental health this 90 days. And then the last kind of category that I have is social. So as y'all know, or maybe you don't know, but I guess in 2024, I started to feel this shifting in me and this need to be a beginner at something. And the thing that I chose was pottery. And I've gotten pretty good at it. And so I've had to set pottery goals for myself so that I can just challenge myself to do different things. Sometimes it's, throwing with 6 pounds of clay. As of recently, it is creating a blade collection because we know blades are the superior dinnerware. A blade is a bowl and a plate. It's like a plate with raised edges. So it's a blade. I have created a collection of 9 or 10 of them. And I want to have a dinner party at my house just with my friends, and everybody will get to take home the blade that they eat off of. That is on my social goal. But I do go to pottery at a community kiln. So I can't necessarily say when these plates are going to be done, but they'll probably be done within the next 6 weeks. That's my local dinner party. But I also am going to be going to London for work in the end of October. So I'm working now to find a place to have a dinner party there, because I know a lot of this audience, the Black in the Saddle family, there's a lot of people in the UK, and I would love to have a meetup there and do dinner and connect with some brands that might be interested in treating these Black horsemen and women to an amazing experience somewhere in London. So I am working on that as well. And then lastly, speaking of Black in the Saddle fam, I think I've mentioned this a little bit before, but I am working on launching a Patreon to support this work. I got some really dope things coming down the pipeline, some more virtual events, but I also want to do more in-person events and create a community platform that is not a Facebook group, but also acknowledging when I need help with things. It is going to be something that you can choose to support this platform, Black in the Saddle, with some dollars. Okay. That's one of the things that I'm working on. And I will let y'all know when that's ready. And lastly, I am going to hang out with my good friend, Martha, and we're going to go to the Chincoteague Pony Swim. And the way we're going to do it is definitely a way to remember. We're going to have to document this process. Yeah, I think this year is the 100th Chincoteague Pony Swim. So it's going to be a little crazy and we're going to have fun. So that's part of my social category. That's all my social category for this 90-day recommitment plan. I think for the emotional category, it is doing things like this. It's having transparent conversations with family and friends to be more clear about what I need. You know, I am the eldest daughter in every sense of the words. And I'm always taking care of things, right? I don't necessarily share what I need or it. Growing up, if you were super needy, it was like, you can't do this yourself. I still combat that spirit every day. And my friends will tell you, I'll say, did you Google it? Very quickly. But actually saying what I need and talking about what I'm dealing with and what I'm carrying and letting people show up for me like I have showed up for them. That is the last part of this 90-day plan. So if you would like to commit to your own 90 days, you know, those are just some of the things that I'm focused on. You might notice this is not something that's super stringent and super strict. I don't have a dissertation for what I'm going to do. I think it being very manageable and something that I can be excited about is very important to the success of this recommitting to myself and my horse for the next 90 days. So if you have any questions or any insights, let me know. And I would love for you to share either in the comments or DM me on social media to let me know what you're focusing on for the next 90 days and how I can support you in that journey. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Black in the Saddle. Don't forget to like us where you can like us, subscribe where you can subscribe, follow where you can follow, and share this with a friend who needs some help processing some of the grief they might be experiencing in their journey. Thank you again, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye.